Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for sticking around. We're talking about some of the new planks of the Democratic Party platform. Well, the point I was going to make was that, I know a lot of, I got a lot of friends of mine that smoke marijuana. You and I disagree pretty strongly about marijuana and what it does. But I do believe, just from, anecdotal evidence, my own experience, since there is no good scientific studies that have been done on marijuana, especially recently, that there is a responsible dosage. There's a responsible use that people can put marijuana to. There are folks that are able to smoke marijuana responsibly, that it doesn't have a negative effect on their lives whatsoever. I haven't really smoked marijuana consistently since college. Mainly because for me, it does affect my memory. If I smoke too much in a night, I have a hard time remembering things, and that's not something I'm willing to compromise. But I think that for most people, there is a responsible amount. Methamphetamine, for example, I just don't know. It doesn't seem like it at all. So the question becomes, can we really dismantle? Are we going to then single out drug? Are we going to make even more of a patchwork mess of drug policy by making some drugs legal and some drugs illegal the way that it is now already? Or is it better public policy to make them all legal, like where possession and consumption of a particular drug is no longer illegal, but it would maybe open you up to some kind of civil commitment or drug abuse problem? The truth is we're now in my bailiwick. And one of the things that people don't understand about drug legalization is a drug becomes legal if it meets several different criteria. And there are drugs that have been made illegal because they don't meet some of these criteria. Namely, it has to be effective at treating a problem. Number two, the side effects to it in other words, the risks don't outweigh the benefits. And three, there's really a half-life issue. Half-life is how long that medication lasts. If you, let's say marijuana, the area under the curve of marijuana is very, very narrow. And that's what they look at. The problem is, by the time this stuff gets out of your system, you're talking months down the road. And the good effect of it lasts, 4 hours, 6 hours, something like that? It depends on how good the weed is. Yeah, it depends on how good the weed. So there's, but the bottom line is that metabolite, that half-life of that stays in the system so much longer. The other thing is, as a group, there are other medications that work much better than marijuana to treat the things that these people that are advocates of marijuana say. Now, as far as good studies, since Colorado's legalized it, there's been a ton of studies coming out of Colorado. Most of it is not good news for pot smokers. Don't get me wrong. There's always going to be that one guy that really does benefit that you can prove. The problem is having one guy, having anecdotal evidence, and we've said that before, doesn't make for sound scientific policy. The other problem, and we'll talk specifically about methamphetamine. Here's the truth. I use methamphetamine on my patients every single day. I have 6 kids in today. They're all on Ritalin. That's all methamphetamine. Now, they have changed the formula and the name so they don't have to call it meth, but that's what it is. The dangerousness of meth is not the actual parent compound. The danger of meth, when people think about it, is all the extra crap that's in there. It's like smoking a cigar. It probably isn't, safe for you, but it isn't anywhere near as bad as cigarettes because of all the crap they have to put in cigarettes to make it so that you can actually inhale that. So the bottom line is there's a legitimate use for meth. It happens every day. It's Ritalin. We treat people with several different problems with Ritalin. ADHD, sleep apnea, narcolepsy. There's another one we use. Oh, in the old days, depression. It's a great depression medication. So there are legitimate uses for that. And so when we start talking about legalizing all these drugs, you have to keep in mind there's a reason why some of these drugs are illegal, and that's because there's really no benefit to it. The last thing I'm going to say is it doesn't matter what addictive drug it is, you're going to have somebody that's going to ruin their life over it. You can't avoid it. It will depend entirely on that individual. There are people I know that are pregnant, use all kinds of stimulants. And that's one of the worst things to do for your kid. The problem is I also have patients that are depressed during their pregnancy. And out of everything that you can do during pregnancy that's terrible for your kid, being depressed during pregnancy is the number one determinant about how your kid does. So I told you all that information so that when this subject comes up down the road, because this is how the Democrats do it, they start way down the road introducing all this stuff to change our culture, and then pretty soon it will kind of build in its own way.
Well, so I guess, I mean, the just to take off, that's not the only reason why drugs, I mean, a health benefit or treating a problem is not the only reason why a drug or an intoxicant is legal.
I didn't mean to say that was. I said there's many, many things that go into it, but from the FDA perspective, this is how they look at a lot of these things.
But, well, as far as marijuana is concerned, a medical usage of marijuana is not, I think that's probably one of the weaker arguments for the legalization of marijuana. It's just the thing that has gotten people kind of on their side is that marijuana as a whole, study after study, and we've disagreed on this before, study after study has demonstrated that marijuana, all things being equal, is no more or less harmful for people to use than alcohol. And that a free people in a free society using something like alcohol should be able to use marijuana if they want to. That's sort of, I think that's been the best argument for the legalization of pot, is that pot is a drug similar to tobacco and alcohol that can be regulated in a similar way, that can be used in a similar way by responsible adults. Of course, we haven't been able to study marijuana the way that we've studied alcohol and cigarettes over the years, because marijuana has been illegal since the early part of the 20th century. But anyway, legalization of drugs, it makes us all look like pot-smoking hippies in the Democratic Party, which I can assure you a lot of them were not cool enough to be pot-smoking hippies that I saw there on Saturday. Yeah. then the last one, the cleaning up the space. We've heard about the space junk, that NASA's worried about this stuff that's just kind of floating around up there, and the Democrats, I don't know, I didn't read that vote, but they want to they want to make that a priority, is cleaning space up.
Well, what you do is you just send up a giant magnet.
Something, I guess.
And then when it's all full, you just send it to the sun.
These environmentalists who've given up on the earth.
Well, part of what the problem with space junk is like there's a guy dropped a wrench up there several years ago. Well, if you're flying around 17,000 miles an hour and you smack into a wrench, that's bad news.
That's bad. Or if that wrench, because the orbital speed of our communication satellites is pretty fast. One of those intercepts that wrench, and that would be that'd be a disaster for everybody watching the Cubs game on a Thursday.
Yes. Well, ice crystals is the number one problem, because they'll accrete, and pretty soon you got an ice rock. And if you have an ice rock the size of a baseball clipping along at 30,000 miles an hour, that's going to leave a mark.
That's a hard thing to hit.
That's going to be.
So
especially with a round bat.
Right. I want to move on to. We talked about this a little bit last week when he first got going.
We're up against the break.
Oh, okay.
So what is it you want to talk about real quick?
I want your thoughts about this firing of Corey Lewandowski.
Oh, yeah,
and the
we're
Trump
going to
stuff.
finish up with that.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll be back after this. Corey Lewandowski, who is Trump's campaign manager, gets canned. So we'll have all the inside information for you right after this break. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We couldn't do what we do with